Welcome back. So starting out the week, I'm working on the nose gear doors again. So I'm just taking off the 5-minute epoxy there where I had those support braces that were holding each of the hinges in alignment. And I've already taken the peel ply off from the layup, as you can see. So just using a little air tool there with a burring tool on the end of it there, just able to quickly clean off the remaining bits of that 5-minute. So they came out alright, and the goal now is to set them up inside the fuselage and make sure that they close correctly. And then the next challenge is to figure out how I'm going to have them open and close when the gear retracts and extends, or extends and retracts. So here I'm just cleaning off or taking off the peel ply off the layups that I did there around where the little hinge tabs are inside the nose compartment. And I just did a rough job on putting that peel ply in there because the surfaces were all over the place, and it's difficult to put peel ply down on anything other than really flat or just basically curved surfaces. So which meant, because I didn't do a great job of putting peel ply in there, I had to do a little bit of cleanup work in there. So again, covered in a bit of carbon dust, having to work under there, and itchy again for the start of the day, so that's not fun. So there they are, just basically put the bolts in there and got them working, and a little bit of adjustment to get them to sort of sit exactly where I wanted them to. But they're working, and they're in place, and they'll be solid enough, I believe, with those heavy hinges on there. So yeah, trying to figure out how to make that close. That's a challenge, and it's been stumping me, but I'm working my way towards a solution. So here I got Devon to spray the repair there on that nose gear retraction linkage. So that one's pretty much ready to go back into place now, but I'm not sort of rushing it right away because I was working on those gear doors. And Jeff and Devon been working further on the lower skin of the foreplane here. As you can see, got the different access panels pretty much done. And these are the elevators, so they're just fixing up little imperfections in those and getting them ready for another round of primer, I guess. And just closing out around where the hinges themselves are, just making it all neat and tidy. So that's kind of what Jeff's doing here, is just putting a little bit of epoxy just there in where the hinges are coming out of the skin, because there's kind of like a little bit of a visible gap there. So just closing that out nicely, so when it's all done, it looks good. And as you can see, man, when you're working with this epoxy and carbon fiber and stuff like that, there's so much just detail stuff that has to be done. The labor is just intensive. It's crazy. Anyway, so there's the foreplane, and the other hole's been cut in there, and the spar and the reinforcement that you saw before is obviously still there. So that one's ready to have the push rod go through there now. And I've taken the masking tape off of this one, so as you can see, pretty good match job. It's a little bit more gloss than the powder coat that we had on there, but won't take long to get it a little bit dirty and dusty, and you won't even know that it was painted on that one end. So my next job, this is a little fix that I had to do because of a change that Mark did way back when on the main gear. So I have to cut this little corner off of the gear door part, which sort of matches into the fuselage, and then that has to be bonded onto the fuselage. So I cut that out with the Dremel saw, and what I'm doing now is getting on there with the sanding wheel, the right angle, and just cleaning off the back of it, because I sort of cut a little bit into what was the area where there was core behind there. So I'm just flattening that out. And ultimately this little piece, and this is one for either side, will get bonded onto the fuselage. And the reason why that's there is because the bracket that Mark had us make to hold the gear, support the gear, which wasn't in my original design, that ended up being in the way of where the doors, the gear doors actually sort of slid into the fuselage, as you'll see here in a second. So the door used to slide into the fuselage here, and because that bracket is there behind there now, you'll see, I'll just show you here, that bracket there, the door wouldn't slide in there anymore. It would actually bump into that. So I had to redesign this, that the door's going to have this weird little shape, this little cutout there, and then the rest of that opening there is going to be the door, and it will slide into itself underneath. And then this is the one from the other side. So as I said, with everything composite and stuff, it's not as simple as just, you know, cutting that and away you go, because there's primer on the flange there where that needs to be bonded into place. I have to take the primer off of that, and of course here I'm just actually shaping that because the corner of it, that door hadn't been rounded off yet, that little piece. So I'm just shaping that so it matches that little radius on the bottom right corner. And so the next thing I have to do is I have to take the most of the primer off of the flange there where this is going to be bonded into place. So what I'm doing here is just marking out kind of where it's going to be, and then I take some masking tape and just mask around that area, just so I know, you know, kind of like a surgeon really, just so I know where I'm working, because it's much easier to work up to masking tape than it is to work up to a line, because you know, once the dust starts flying you can't see the line, but at least you can see the tape. And also tape, you know, protects the edge when you get up to it, at least from just a quick hit with the sanding wheel. So yeah, here I'm just figuring out, okay, that's where it is, and I'll just put my tape across the top there, and then I put some down the side and on the bottom, and then I can get on there with the sanding wheel and just carefully take the primer off, just take it back to the raw carbon fiber, and then that little panel there will have a nice surface to be bonded to, and ultimately you'll get a little bit of fill around there just to smooth the whole thing out, so you won't sort of see that it was a little patched add-on. But anyway, as I said, that was just another little thing, and there's a lot of these little things now that happened because of changes that, you know, to the design, that ultimately require some other little change, a ripple effect if you want to call it that, which just means more and more little bits of work that need to be done. And ultimately, you know, when it comes to production, these are the sort of things that will just be built in ahead of time. You won't have to sort of worry about, you know, manually doing this. It'll be a change in the actual tooling to do this, to make this part of the fuselage or whatever. So ideally, in a perfect world, we wouldn't have to deal with carbon fiber, and we'd make all this out of metal the way the car companies do their stuff, and we'd be stamping Raptors out at, you know, coming off the production line at 1 every 10 minutes, which would be fun. I kind of been thinking about that. It's not a bad idea, but trying to talk somebody into tooling up a robotic auto production thing to make Raptors would be a bit of a challenge, but anyway, might be an idea one day. And there's the elevator, or both of the elevators. Pretty much done now. Devon's been finishing off the sanding of those. I think they're going to get another coat of primer. I haven't been asking the guys. And so back in the nose compartment here, I've got that linkage back in place there. And for some reason, after that was in place, the hydraulic strut there seemed to be slightly too long or something, so I had to adjust the length of that again. It's just a threaded thing, so as you can see, I've got the threaded end off of it right now, because in order to adjust it I needed to actually shorten the thread. It was a little bit too long. So nose gear just about ready to go back in place, and fortunately we're able to put the aircraft back on its main gear, and you'll see that in a minute. And speaking of main gear, so I'm on to doing the rest of the main gear doors now. So I've got to make these brackets in here. That's the first thing. 2 different brackets that are going to support that other part of that door, the one that I cut the little corner off of. So these brackets are going to be out of aluminum, and I'm going to be up to Brits tomorrow and bending these out of aluminum and cutting the holes in them and just getting them to the right shape. So that's just sort of 2 of them together there, so I could just print out flat the whole shape and take it up to Brits, so I have a kind of like a template that I'm working off of. So, and that's kind of what it looks like when it's printed out, because they're not just perfectly parallel. There's a little bit of angle on one side, and the holes will meet up to the bolt holes in the gear. So yeah, we got the aircraft back on the gear, and Jeff was able to go and put the fill there on the seams underneath, and he'll be able to go and fair that transition out now, so it'll be nice and smooth. There won't be any sort of lip between between the strake and the rear part of the wing. And likewise, he's done the leading edge. He just didn't do that last time, didn't have enough material going. And also got the half the leading edge done on this winglet there. I guess he just had some extra material left, extra fill. So there's the other one there that's done as well. So anyway, things are moving along, and I'm trying to talk Jeff into bringing somebody else on to help with the bodywork, because we really want to be out of the shop by the end of the month. I mean, we've got to be out of the shop by the end of the month, and all the bodywork really needs to be done. So anyway, hopefully I can talk him into finding somebody to help out. That's our update for the first half of this week, and thanks again for watching.